Imagine waking up one morning with everything you love, everything you've worked for, everyone you care about, and going to bed that night with it all gone. This isn't a nightmare. This was Job's reality. Picture Job in his prime, wealthy beyond measure. 7 sons, 3 daughters, a full house of laughter and love. Thousands of livestock dotting his land like living symbols of God's blessing. He was the greatest man in all the East, the Bible tells us. Not just wealthy, but righteous. Not just successful, but genuinely good. Job didn't just have faith, he lived it. He offered sacrifices for his children, just in case they had sinned in their hearts. He was the man we all wish we could be. Prosperous, righteous, loved by God and man alike. But here's what we often miss when we tell Job's story. Being righteous didn't make him invincible. Being faithful didn't give him a shield. And that's where our modern hearts start to break alongside his. Then came the day, 4 messengers, 4 devastating reports, each one arriving before the previous tragedy had time to sink in. Your oxen and donkeys, raiders took them all, killed the servants. Before Job could process this loss, the second messenger, fire from heaven burned up the sheep and the servants. Then the third, Chaldeans raided your camels, everyone's dead. And as Job's mind reeled from losing his livelihood, his security, his future, the fourth messenger delivered the blow that would shatter any parent's soul. A wind collapsed the house where your children were feasting. They're all gone, all 10 of them. 10 children. In one day. Imagine that phone call, that knock on the door, that moment when your life splits cleanly into before and after, and you know with crushing certainty that before is never coming back. Job didn't lose his possessions first and his children later, giving him time to gradually adjust to each loss. He lost everything in one catastrophic day. One moment he was a father to 10, a wealthy landowner, a man blessed beyond measure. The next moment he was sitting in ashes, his children buried, his fortune gone, his future uncertain. As if losing everything and everyone wasn't enough, Job's body began to betray him too. Painful sores erupted from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. The Hebrew word used suggests a burning, festering condition that left him unrecognizable. His wife, who had lost those 10 children too, remember, couldn't bear to watch him suffer anymore. "Curse God and die," she pleaded, not from cruelty, but from desperation. She wanted his pain to end, even if it meant losing him too. Job sat in the ashes of his former life, scraping his sores with broken pottery, and in that moment, he faced a choice we all must face when crisis hits. Will I curse God? Will I give up? Or will I somehow find a way to keep breathing through this? Enter Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They came to comfort him, and for 7 days they did exactly the right thing. They sat with him in silence. Sometimes presence is the only gift we can offer. But then they started talking, and their words cut deeper than his sores. "Job, you must have sinned. Good people don't suffer like this unless they've done something wrong. God is just. This is punishment for secret wickedness. Repent and God will restore you." These friends turned Job's suffering into a theological equation. Suffering equals sin. They made him responsible for tragedies he never caused. They questioned his character when he needed support. They explained away his pain when he needed them to simply acknowledge it. Sound familiar? How many times have we heard, or even thought, everything happens for a reason? Or, God only gives you what you can handle when someone is drowning in grief? How many times have we made suffering people feel like they need to justify their pain or find the lesson in their loss? Job's friends meant well. They had good theology, but they lacked what Job needed most, the courage to sit with mystery, to comfort without explaining, to love without fixing. In his anguish, Job asked the questions that echo in every broken heart. Why didn't I die at birth? Why is light given to those in misery? If I've sinned, show me how. If not, why am I suffering? Will you torment a driven leaf? These aren't intellectual questions posed in comfortable classrooms. These are gut-wrenching cries from someone whose faith is being crushed under the weight of inexplicable loss. And here's what makes Job's story so devastatingly relevant to us. He never gets the answers we want. God never explains why Job had to suffer, never provides a neat theological package that makes the pain make sense. Instead, God shows up and essentially says, I am God and you are not. There are things you cannot understand because you are human. Some find this response frustrating. But maybe that's precisely what Job and we need to hear. Maybe the question isn't why do bad things happen to good people, but can we trust God even when we can't understand him? Job's story isn't just ancient history. Look around you. The mother who loses her child to cancer, the faithful man who loses his job and his savings in an economic crash, the devoted wife whose husband dies suddenly, leaving her alone after 40 years of marriage, the young person whose mental illness makes every day a battle for survival. We live in a world where Job's experience is repeated daily, where good people suffer inexplicably, where faith doesn't guarantee comfort, health, or happiness, where the righteous struggle and the wicked sometimes prosper. The pandemic taught us this viscerally. Churches closed, prayers felt unanswered, and some of the most faithful people we knew suffered the most. Good people died alone in hospital rooms. Families lost everything despite doing everything right. Job's story forces us to reckon with a faith that's real enough to endure when God feels absent, strong enough to persist when prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, honest enough to admit when we're angry at the God we're supposed to trust. Job's story doesn't explain suffering, it validates it. It says your pain is real, your questions are legitimate, and your faith can be honest about both. Job teaches us that you can be righteous and still suffer. Faith isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card from life's hardships. Sometimes the storms hit the righteous hardest, not because they deserve it, but because life in a broken world means no one is immune to pain. It's okay to feel angry with God. Job wasn't polite in his pain. He was raw, honest, sometimes bitter, and God didn't punish him for it. God can handle our anger, our questions, our desperate accusations. What he can't work with is pretense. Mystery is part of faith. We want explanations, crave meaning, demand that suffering makes sense. But Job learned, and we must learn, that faith sometimes means trusting in the goodness of God even when we can't see it, believing in his love even when we can't feel it. Community matters, even imperfect community. Job's friends failed him spectacularly, but they still showed up, still sat with him. Sometimes the people trying to help us say all the wrong things, but their presence still matters. Suffering doesn't end your story. The Bible tells us that God restored Job's fortunes, gave him another 10 children, and blessed his latter days more than his former ones. This doesn't minimize his losses. Those first 10 children weren't replaceable, but it does remind us that pain, however devastating, doesn't have to be the final word. To be Job is to learn that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding on to God even when you have none. It's about discovering that worship isn't just for good times. It's for the ashes too. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. These words weren't spoken by someone who didn't understand pain. They were torn from the throat of a man who had lost everything, and somehow found the strength to bless God anyway. That's not denial. That's not easy faith. That's faith refined by fire. Faith that has been tested and found real. Job's story is hard because life is hard. It's devastating because loss is devastating. But it's also hopeful because it shows us that we can endure more than we think, that faith can survive even the worst circumstances, and that God is present even when he feels absent. Maybe the hardest part of being Job isn't the suffering itself. It's learning to live with the questions, to find peace in the mystery, to trust in the darkness. It's discovering that God's silence doesn't mean his absence, that his love doesn't always look like protection, and that sometimes the most profound faith is forged in the deepest pain. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Job 13:15. Job's journey through loss, questions, and ultimate restoration reminds us that faith isn't the absence of doubt or pain, it's the presence of trust, despite them. If this story of ancient suffering and timeless faith resonated with you, subscribe for more explorations of how biblical truth meets human struggle. Because in a world that often feels like Job's, we all need reminders that we're not walking through the ashes alone.